Top 3 close calls with death. Number 3. We aren't starting with the brightest in the bunch, because this genius tries to pet a bear. The cub pulls him by his hand and his sleeve, luckily in a curious way, because even just these 3 cubs could have had him as an easy snack. Number 2. A man crossing over a railway, illegally might I add, seems to have absolutely zero situational awareness, sense of urgency, or survival instinct, because he nonchalantly walks over and gets back up. If he could have possibly walked any slower, he would have been a pancake on the railroad. Number 1. A steel mill worker notices something wrong in the chain. You can see a disconnect here, but his back is turned to the molten steel rope slinging towards him. All this thing has to do is touch him, and he'll be worse off than a burnt marshmallow. Seemingly at the very last second, he noticed a danger directly behind him, barely escaping. If this guy had reacted as slow as this guy, he would end up looking like this. Be smart, be like him. 5 interesting stuff. Number 5. The KKK actually had a youth program. Radical propaganda has to start young, so the victim won't notice. Thus, the Ku Klux Kiddies were founded. Number 4. We're used to big cats and their infamous roar, but cheetahs meow, and sometimes kinda chirp. Number 3. This is an Eden's whale, feeding off the Gulf of Mexico. Waiting each corner of its mouth, just below the water's surface, allows the fish to pile up for an easy meal. Number 2. This is what $100 million worth of coke being smuggled inside of an excavator looks like. Pretty sure this was in Australia, so yeah, they got something going on there. And number 1. If you're easily creeped out, then look away. But these are real human bodies donated to science to make education fun. Some find it weird, but it does teach anatomy in a fun way. But I imagine the people having the most fun is the couple in forever, how do I put this? Copulating in carnal knowledge? For science? Donate your body, and this can be you. Time out. Commercial break. Only 7% of you guys are subscribed. Help me change that. 92.4 of you guys subscribe right now while you're watching the video. That way you never miss one of these. Also, feel free to join the Discord down below. Alright, commercial break over. The ladder that cannot be moved. In the city of Jerusalem, there lies a ladder under a window just above the entrance that leads to the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, which is around 1600 years old. It's claimed to hold the spot that Jesus was crucified and the tomb he was buried in. 6 different denominations of religion claim it's their holy site, so they have a sort of Jesus tug-of-war. In 1757, all 6 religions agreed to share the holy site. It was decreed the holy site would not be changed without the approval of all 6 groups. They can't even agree on repairs, so in turn it's crumbling. Which brings up the ladder. It was sitting in this spot during the agreement. Even in 2002, a royal rumble started because someone moved the chair slightly to the right so their head would be in the shade. So yeah, you can move it. But you probably won't. And if you do, you'll probably get royally pounded. 5 interesting stuff. Number 5. This is an 11-year-old McDonald's cheeseburger, chicken nugget, and fries. Not really sure you can legally call this food. Number 4. Tigers stick out like a sore thumb in their natural habitat, to us. But to their prey, like deer, boars, and other red-green colorblind animals, they look more like this. Number 3. These are descendant aides who were in the middle of a domestic terrorist attack on the US Capitol during January 6, 2021, through what can only be described as courage and quick thinking, rushed the electoral ballots to safety before the breach. Number 2. The richest man in the world is no longer Jeff Bezos. That spot was taken yesterday by entrepreneur Elon Musk, founder of Tesla and SpaceX. And number 1. This bizarre creature known as the Putu looks like it's straight out of a fairy tale, crossed between a frog and a bird. They're pretty rare and they're found in South America. If you're wondering what it sounds like, here it is. Who are the richest people in the world? And we aren't talking about Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos either. All their wealth is accounted for. We're talking about the actual richest people in the world. Unaccounted for money. Money off the radar. Rich people many times richer than these 2 right here. Bashar al-Assad, a longtime Middle Eastern dictator. His official net worth is around $1 to $5 billion. But through corruption, his estimated net worth is suspected to be around $110 to $200 billion. Vladimir Putin, he claims to make $135,000 a year, but has billions of dollars worth of mansions and has been spotted wearing $500,000 outfits. Is suspected through theft in his 17 years in office has legally gained around $200 to $350 billion, making him the single richest person in the world. The Rothschilds family is estimated at $500 billion. But the House of Saudi, through the extraction of oil and hidden funds, have estimates upward of $1.5 to $2 trillion. They can afford anything they want and are the highest 0.001% that it gets. These are the richest people in the world. Don't forget to tune in next time. We wouldn't want you to miss out on any mysterious content. Now would we? Who killed Susan Cadieux? In the yard of St. Mary's Catholic Church in Ontario, Canada, 5-year-old Susan Cadieux was playing with her two brothers, Michael and Patrick. Their neighbor Virginia was playing too. It was evening time on Friday, January 6th. The children were eventually approached by a tall man, who was unshaved and thin. The boys described him as wearing a brown coat and black boots. He claimed to have an appointment with the priest at the church. Virginia, the neighbor, fell on some ice, and while the two brothers were distracted helping her up, the strange man left with 5-year-old Susan, convincing her he had some treats for her nearby. Once they noticed Susan was gone, they looked everywhere with their parents, and then ended up calling the police. Not surprisingly, the priest hadn't scheduled a man for an appointment that day. Later that night, they decided they'd take a break and pick up looking for Susan in the morning. At approximately 10 a.m. the next morning, they found her, dead, laying in a warehouse nearby, clothes torn off, body covered in bruises, and with her own tears frozen to her face. It was later found out her life had only been taken 3 hours before being found, leaving the parents to wonder if they had searched deep into the night, or even got up 3 hours earlier if they'd still had their daughter. In the same year, 10 more girls fell victim to sexual assault in the area, and the only suspect, Alexander Kalichuk, was never questioned. Her parents died in 1990, her brothers died in 1995 and 2010, and no one was ever arrested. Which leads you to wonder a bigger question: how many murderers throughout history have went unpunished? The estimated many millions of people is truly unsettling. Mind-blowing facts with Jearrod. Urine was used for teeth whitening and bleaching of clothes in ancient Rome. Yes, they rinsed their mouth out with human and animal urine. Despite being the largest mammal, blue whales do not have the largest buttholes. They defecate through an anus the size of a grapefruit. It was once thought for birds to learn to talk, you had to release their tongue. This was done by cutting their tongue completely or partially off, of course, without any anesthesia or painkillers. The tongue release plays absolutely no role in the bird's ability to talk. The little girl who voiced Ducky in The Land Before Time was murdered by her father before the movie even came out. Her gravestone says, "Yep, yep, yep." In Australia, there's a plant called the gimpy gimpy that has such a severe sting that horses who brush up against it throws themselves off of cliffs because they'd rather die than continue experiencing the pain. The reason dogs love squeaky toys is because they sound like small animals dying. The #1 cause of death among pregnant women is murder. Top 5 most venomous animals. Number 5, the cone snail. They live in the ocean floor, and their unique teeth allow them to penetrate wetsuits. One little snail can kill 20 adult humans. Number 4, the Irukandji jellyfish shows us it's not the size that matter, but it's the motion in the ocean. Literally, they're the size of a fingertip, and jellyfish only move if the ocean pushes them. Getting stung is game over. There's no antivenom, and even morphine won't stop the excruciating pain. Number 3, the blue-ringed octopus. It'll kill you in under half an hour, and 25 of your close friends at the same time. Some people have even been dumb enough to hold one of these. Number 2, the inland taipan snake. While it can take 45 minutes to kill, it can kill 100 people. And what good is a venomless without a snake? Number 1, the box jellyfish. While its venom isn't as deadly, you won't know what hit you. Without the right lighting, they're nearly invisible in the water, causing extreme pain, delirious thoughts, shock, cardiac arrest, and death in 60 minutes or less. No matter how you list them though, it doesn't really matter, because if you run into one of these, dead is dead, no matter how many people it could have killed alongside you. The iron lung. Before the vaccine of polio was widespread and accessible, the death rate for it was up to 30%. But even if death wasn't your final stop, you would still have persisting symptoms of decreased tolerance to cold and hot temperatures, trouble breathing, sleeplessness, fatigue, and paralysis. But the iron lung was used for the trouble breathing, named the cure for respiratory failure caused by poliomyelitis. It's powered by a motor that pumps air to change the pressure inside the metal cylinder, pulling air in and out of your lungs. Though seeming like a relic of the distant past, here is Paul Alexander today, still on one. He was an average kid until he contracted polio when he was only 6 years old. Ever since, his life has relied on the efforts of this machine. Without it, he would not survive. It's crazy to think. A little shot can prevent a lifetime of suffering.
Ladies and gentlemen, you are looking at the business end of an iron lung. And that sound that you'll hear is the air being forced into the lungs so that the patient can breathe. And if anyone should pull the plug, stopping that air, the patient would die within a minute.
There have been 17 women executed via capital punishment in the USA since the lift. That accounts for about 1%, as the other 99% have been men. On January 13th, 2021, Lisa Montgomery was executed by lethal injection, being the first woman in 6 years to endure it. It always seems to make the news because people don't want to see women killed as much as men. But in this case, even the most pro-life have questioned if this was a just punishment. As for the crime, On December 16, 2004, 36-year-old Lisa Montgomery broke into pregnant 23-year-old Bobby Jo Stinnet's house. She then used a rope to strangle Bobby Jo until she was deceased, then proceeded to use a kitchen knife to cut out her unborn baby from her womb. She then quickly made her way back home, intending to pretend she was the mother of the baby. After about an hour, Bobby Jo's mother found her dead daughter and alerted the authorities. The next day, Lisa was caught by the police. The child survived and was given to the father, though this case isn't so black and white. During her sentencing, her mental health wasn't taken into account. She has what's been described as the most horrific backstory. Her mental health case was thrown out, insanity was thrown out, and she was sentenced to death. And that's why this incident is so conflicting. What do you think? Was a death penalty justified in this case? 5 interesting stuff. Number 5. This is the first ever US presidential inauguration photographed. It was taken in 1857 of James Buchanan. Sadly, he's known as the number 1 or number 2 worst president in American history. Number 4. We've all had cramps, but a severe cramp looks something like this. The extreme amount of pain he would be in would be nearly unbearable.
God. Oh my God.
Number 3. And on a less painful note, this is what it looks like to harvest marble. Number 2. This is a 40,000-year-old baby mammoth carcass. It was so well preserved that its brain was still intact. To put that into perspective of how old it is, there were still Neanderthals crossbreeding with humans in Europe at that time period. And number 1, what you're looking at is a real-life dragon, commonly known as a red-eyed crocodile skink. It's got a dinosaur-like plated head, with body spines and that distinctive red ring around its eyes. Lucky for you, they're often kept as pets, so technically you can own a dragon. Comfort women. Sometime before and during World War II, women of different nationalities were captured by Imperial Japanese Army and forced into sexual slavery to comfort the Japanese Army. The rough estimation of women captured and assaulted is around 350,000. Most of these women coming from Korea, China, and the Philippines, but dozens of other countries women were affected as well. During times of war, assault on women in this manner rise, and to defer that, they abducted young women out of their homes, and sometimes even put up false jobs advertising young women to start careers in nursing, higher education, or even cooking. But once they arrived to the comfort stations, their worst nightmares would commence. Most opened from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m., assaulting constantly, starting in 1932 and continuing to 1945, meaning there are plenty of women still alive today that went through these atrocities. Some couldn't return home because of shame, others were dumped in the forest to wander aimlessly, a sad ending for most. But in 1991, Japan finally admitted to committing these crimes and opened up a fund to help care for these women, as most of them got too damaged in their daily assault to have children, to carry out normal life from physical and mental scarring, and also the carrying of many STDs.
손마들을 공자이라 하는데 뭐 죽기 하겠나. 제2부두에서는 밤 연락선을 타고 우리들이 식구들이 한 30명, 32명 이래 됐거든. 18살, 20살 막 그런 정도지.
근데 어떤 걸 시켰는데?
날만 세면은 상대하는 게지.
근데 그걸 하루에 몇 번?
난 12시부터 시작해가지고 저녁 6시까지 줄로 쓴다고요.
줄로 서요?
네. 미차 안 나오면 막 문 딱 두드리고 빨리 나오라 하고 그래.
계속 이제.
그렇지. 하나 나가면은 또.
Two sentence horror stories. I looked out from the second floor at a bloody mess outside on the street and realized that my parents had been lying to me. They told me babies were bouncing bundles of joy, but my brother had barely bounced at all. What's it like being dead? The little girl asked me. I held her hand, looked at her in the eye, and spelled out, cold and lonely, on the Ouija board. It's all in your head, my doctor told me, as we both stared, horrified, at my x-ray. The aliens interviewed every last human to see if they were good and worth saving. Then they asked the animals. As the rapture began, I was bitterly disappointed to find myself left behind, and then I looked up at the departing figures and saw all the open jaws awaiting them in the sky. My son wakes me up by screaming at the top of his lungs. It always gets louder leading up to the anniversary of his death.